have to be honest and say I didn't have a lot to say. And from somewhere the idea came that we should travel down into Croatia to refugee camps there and take people some winter clothes. And just that relatively simple experience, I suppose, was the beginning of it. After that trip, the conversations between John and I sort of advanced, and the notion of should we try and actually help deeper into Bosnia itself came up, and we thought about how we could best do that, and we decided that perhaps medicine would have the biggest impact. You know, it would be most honest to say that we didn't go in with much of a plan. We didn't know what we were doing, and we just went in and tried. It's a simple idea to think that you can help people. And if you keep it simple, then I suspect your chances of having an effect are greater.
With a load of medical supplies, a lot of goodwill, and some naivety, Tony, American John Ashton, and another Kiwi, John Coghill, launched the Emergency Medical Response Agency. The team climbed into their Land Rover, nicknamed the Beast, and began their first trip into the war zone. First stop was the city of Mostar.
Getting into Mostar was an interesting experience because travelling these roads with the various militia groups around, none of whom were really regular militia with any degree of training or discipline, was a scary prospect, particularly for someone like me who had no experience at this. And so we were very careful as to where we drove, and we decided to take one or two back routes to try and avoid known militant checkpoints, be those Croatian or Serb or even Bosnian. All sides were unpredictable, I think it's fair to say. And we're going along one particular back road above, a little south of Mostar, and came across basically a ruined church. It was not quite rubble, but certainly extremely damaged, and the inside in particular was damaged. A lot of gunfire, a lot of what I grew to recognise as rocket-propelled grenade damage. Clearly a desecration more than a battlefield, I think. From Mostar, we carried on up into Sarajevo.
But before they could enter the city, they had to pass a checkpoint run by a notorious militia member called Sonia.
There was a checkpoint called Checkpoint Charlie. Cautiously pull up towards this checkpoint and are waved over to the side of the road by several AK-47 holding Serb militia. And in front of us on the road, there were dark, dried stains, which were clearly blood stains. But we knew well from, reporting and United Nations briefings that Checkpoint Charlie was absolutely a place where ethnic cleansing had happened. Murders had taken place, and this lady Sonia was accused of leading or personally committing a number of these murders. Nervous, hands on the wheel, don't want to get out of the vehicle. You don't want to get out of the vehicle when you're in those situations. And then a lady walks out of a hut or something on the side of the road, and John Ashton said, "That's Sonia." And in those situations, the truth is it's pretty unlikely that internationals as we were going to be shot. But there's every possibility that I'd just confiscate our vehicle and take what's inside it and tell us to walk down the road.
Sonia made Tony get out of the vehicle and open up the boot. She began to search amongst their supplies.
And then she saw something towards the back of the boxes and just sort of gestured towards them, and I didn't really know what she meant. So I reached in and I found a box of tampons. It took me a moment to realise she was gesturing towards those, and then it did start to dawn on me. So I picked up a small box of tampons and handed them to her, at which time I immediately sensed a lightening in her mood, the look on her face, the energy around her. And I suppose with relief just grabbed several more boxes of tampons. In fact, I think I gave her everything we had.
Once free, they made their way along Sarajevo's infamous Sniper's Alley and into the city. Tony was shocked by how it looked.
Hurt. Everywhere you look, mortar damage, RPG damage, many bullet holes. There must have been some quite big guns involved at times because there were some quite big holes in the ground. But the most common thing was bullet damage. I learned over time that the Serb strategy with Sarajevo was that of a diversion. They didn't want to overrun the city. They wanted to make it the focus of international media attention while more conclusive military action was taken around Sarajevo and the countryside with the objective of, well, as we now know, cleansing villages and areas of Bosnia so they could be re-inhabited by Bosnian Serbs. But, Sarajevo was beaten up and sore and ugly.
That initial trip lasted just a few days and was the first of many over the next year. After a while, the strain began to catch up with Tony.
I'd flown out and flown up to the military air base up in Frankfurt and was catching a train back down to Munich. But I started just crying on the train in front of people. There is adrenaline in danger, but it's quite addictive stuff. At one level, I grew to look forward to going in. Between going in, I felt flat. And I know it's perverse and some people won't understand, but it's real. It's a little bit addictive.
The team travelled to Washington and set up a meeting with Congressman Charlie Wilson. Wilson was renowned for his work with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, his exploits later made famous by the movie Charlie Wilson's War. Wilson was also famous for his taste in staff members.
The first room we walked into, not unlike the film, did have a lot of attractive young ladies there. And then looking up above the door that led into Charlie Wilson's office literally was a Stinger missile mounted above the door. The short version is he was dead keen to come into Bosnia with us. Obviously he'd done it in Afghanistan, and if we could achieve that, then a number of things would happen. Obviously a bit more focus on the conflict there, not to say the world wasn't paying attention. And we're after congressional funding, which in the end we didn't get. And in the end, Charlie Wilson did not travel into Bosnia with us. I can only presume that someone told him not to, that he had played that card once before, but he probably wasn't going to be allowed to play that game again.
When in Sarajevo, Tony would hire locals to act as interpreters. One was a young woman named Gorca.
She was a young Serb girl, 18 or 19. To get to the small suburb where her apartment buildings were, where she lived, you had to walk across a bridge, literally nicknamed Body Parts Bridge. And one particular day, I was walking across this bridge with her, and I was scared. It's an open area, and two snipers would shoot down on that bridge. And it was called Body Parts Bridge because, quite literally, these snipers didn't shoot to kill people. They shot to wound them and then leave them there alive, and occasionally shoot a leg or something. Gorca tells me, look, I know one of the snipers. He used to live in our neighbourhood. Actually, I think he used to fancy me. And she said something along the lines of, I don't think he'll shoot me. Of course, I immediately think, well, if he fancies her and I'm walking with her and he's there today, then that may not be a good outcome. We had used some money, some of the precious money that we had, to buy body armour. And you know what? We virtually never wore it. And she, of course, couldn't have body armour. She'd never get near it. So how could I? So I wouldn't.
This was brutal, personal war, fought between neighbours and relatives, and fired by ethnic and religious hatred.
I remember being in Travnik, the Muslim call to prayer. Whenever the call would go across the town, immediately the gunfire would increase. The hospital, which was in active use, was being shelled. The staff put a big red cross on it, and it attracted more gunfire.
Across the country were military checkpoints, always sites of potential trouble. On one occasion, the team was stopped by a group of obviously drunk soldiers. Tony was ordered out of the vehicle, separated from his companions, and taken away into a room.
And then a bottle of Slivovitz, the local white spirit, is on the table, and I'm encouraged to drink. The only thing I could drink, and still the only thing I can drink reasonably, is vodka. But, I don't know, a couple of hours later, I am soundly drunk, and this guy has fallen off his chair and virtually can't stand. But, you know, we'd become brothers. I'd heard some horrible stories of how he had at one stage been stationed around Sarajevo and shot people, and he was very proud to tell me, you know, he'd killed people. And by the time we left, it was farewell, my brother sort of stuff, and claps on the back and bangs on the side of the vehicle as you drive away. Yeah, well, I'm pleased I drank a bit of vodka at university.
But for a tired and increasingly troubled Tony Gardner, the end was near. His breaking point came one evening just before Christmas in 1994. He set out from where he was staying to go to a United Nations base for a shower and some food. At first, Tony paid no attention to the large grassy bank a distance away to his right. But then he noticed something odd.
I heard a sort of a flitting sound above me, and didn't quite know what the sound was, and I actually stopped walking. But I was curious as to what this flitting sound was. Further up the grass bank, the grass started to completely silently, explode. These sort of explosions or bits of grass flying up started to come down the bank towards me. Then it all dawned on me. Then the synapses clicked. The thought fell into place. And I think perhaps the sound arrived at that time. Machine gun sound, that repercussion, bang, 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 bang. And then I knew exactly what was happening. I desperately wanted to fall to the ground, to roll and move, and it felt as if for some reason gravity just decided to stop operating in that little patch for a moment there. And so the fear, the raw fear that you're helpless, you can't do anything, that your reactions are nothing's happening, you're trying to move but nothing's happening. And then I am on the ground and I am rolling, and then I am up and I am running. And once I'd run 5-10 metres, I kind of immediately knew that I was very probably safe.
Nevertheless, Tony was exhausted from the work and the strain of being under fire. He was done.
It was a constant pressure and stress. Then having seen what I'd started to see, that's over time, that's very wearing, it's depressing, it wears you down. And I think I just sort of had enough.
Tony left Sarajevo on what was the last flight out of the city for some time. He made it home to New Zealand, settled in Wellington, got a job and met a girl. But the Bosnian War wasn't done with him yet.
I certainly had lots of emotional moments. I was always looking for reports in the media or reading stuff. Absolutely, there were times when I just couldn't sort of help but cry and fall down a little bit. I think after, 6 months, a year, it sort of started to subside a bit. Time does that.
The siege was finally lifted in 1995, 43 months after it began. More than 12,000 people had been killed. Christmas 2014 will mark the 20th anniversary of Tony Gardner's departure from Sarajevo and the end of his contribution to the relief of its besieged citizens. He has never been back, but hopes, in time, to someday return.